This is the Powered AF Podcast, a show about visionaries, high performers, and entrepreneurs, and their stories on how they push past fear, overcome imposter syndrome, and navigate through the mental roadblocks in order to achieve the highest level of success. And I'm your host, Abu Fofana. We're live. So, welcome. Some big announcements. I know I've been telling y'all for some time that I was thinking about moving. Well, it's finally happening. I am moving on to the next chapter of my life. I'm excited, obviously nervous a bit, and I don't really know. I don't really know how to feel right now. I just cleaned out the apartment. And for those of you that don't know, I've been living in Miami for about 2.5 years, and Miami has been amazing. I've learned a lot over the last 2.5 years, I'm not gonna lie, but it was time to close the chapter. And if you're wondering, I am sitting on the floor right now. If there's an echo, that's because I don't have any furniture to absorb the sound. So you'll hear a lot of echo or my voice. So I'm just giving you all a heads up. And I am currently holding a mic. You might think it's not plugged in, but it's actually a wireless mic. So I'm recording a podcast, and this is going to be on the next episode. And so here was my decision-making process on deciding on whether to move or not, whether knowing if it was the right decision. And if you see around me right now, this is my view. It's been my view for the last 2.5 years. This is the apartment. As you can see, it's emptied out. The only thing that's here left is the Wi-Fi router. Of course, I had to keep the Wi-Fi router here. So I have an air mattress and a Wi-Fi router and my laptop. And I probably have like 3 or 4 pairs of clothes. That's about it. 1 pair of shoes. And I moved everything out. And I am starting over from scratch, which it feels like. I had to have my Wi-Fi router. For those of you that know me, you know that the first question I always ask, whether I'm renting out an Airbnb, whether I am staying at a hotel, is how strong is the Wi-Fi? And most people laugh at me, but this is a serious question. And so the reason why the Wi-Fi is so important, because when you have slow Wi-Fi, it kind of just ruins your mood. You can't actually get things done. You can't actually, I know some of you are like, well, you could unplug and all this stuff, but you don't actually unplug. I know you be checking your phone. out here. Don't do that. And so strong Wi-Fi is always the best indicator of if you're going to have a good time or not. So I'm deciding to move. And I know many of you are asking, well, where are you going? Well, before I tell you where I'm going, let me just talk about how I got here. And so over the last few years, I have been traveling around. And then finally, I remember coming to visit Miami. And when I was in Miami, I came to see my big sis, Dominique Broadway, who does Finance Demystified. So came to see my big sis, and she was enjoying Miami. She was enjoying the scene. And at that time, I was kind of a digital nomad. I was kind of going from place to place. And she said, hey, have you ever thought about just coming down here, moving to Miami? Come try it out. There's a growing culture. There are a lot of people in tech moving down here. And so this is something that I had seen. And every time I came down to visit her, whether it was for her wedding or whether it was for, just because I was like, wow, Miami really has a lot going on. So what did I do? 7 days later, because again, at that time I was a digital nomad, so I'm living out of my suitcase. And when I say I'm living out of my suitcase, I mean not the suitcase that you check in when you're about to go to the airport. You have to check in. I'm talking about a travel size suitcase, the one that you actually roll onto the airplane. And I was living out of my suitcase, a very small suitcase, so I had a really drastic lifestyle change when I bought an apartment. And, when I started renting an apartment, and living out of here. So before that, I had about 5 black T-shirts, 3 or 4 pants, 2 sneakers max, and obviously toothbrushes, etc. But I would just live out of this this small away suitcase, and also these 5 to pairs of clothes that would be in my bag. And one of the things I would do is anytime, because again, I was a digital nomad at that time before I moved to Miami, and now I'm leaving Miami, so I'm just giving y'all the build up. And anytime I would, come to a city when I was a digital nomad, I would actually buy clothes in that city. And then before I left that city, I would donate clothes to the charity, wherever the donation would go. And then I go to the next city. So a lot of times I was shopping in places like Target. I was shopping in places like Walmart because I would just buy basics. As if you know me and you've been following me, I'm always wearing black. And a lot of times I'm always wearing a hoodie, right? I'm always wearing black and I'm always wearing a hoodie. So in any photo you see me, it's really hard to place me like, oh, when did he take that photo? Because I'm always wearing the same thing. And so it's really hard for people to grasp this idea. And I also like that because it's hard for people to be like, oh, you were so-and-so at this time. And I'm like, I always wear that, right? I always wear that. So I would buy these pack of T-shirts. I think it was a pack of 5 black T-shirts at Target for $19.99, $20. And then I would buy some slacks from Express. I think I would get them on sale for like $30 slack. And so my Target tees, everywhere I would travel, this was my ensemble. And then I had a hoodie. Either I would be supporting a friend's brand or I would just buy a straight black hoodie. A lot of times you never see me in design or anything like that because that wasn't part of my ensemble. And in a past life, I used to wear designer everything, right? When I used to live in Milan, Italy, I used to, be heavily into fashion. And so the reason why I decided I was moving, and so when I was a digital nomad, I craved having a space because when you're living out of your suitcase, you can't actually collect anything. Does this make sense? When you're living out of your suitcase and you don't have a home, you can't collect anything. And so I thought, okay, well, I've been doing this the last few years. What does it feel like to have a place of your own and to collect things? And so I would visit my homegirl, my big sis Dominique in Miami, and I said, you know what? Let me try Miami. And so that's what I did. I decided that I was going to move to Miami. And I did, and this is my apartment. And I'm going to show you all what my apartment in Miami that I moved to. As you can see behind me, this is it right here. So this is my view for the last 2.5 years. I had 2 balconies, a really, really great view. And, I enjoyed it. And for the last 2.5 years, this is where I was living. This is where I was getting a lot of my inspiration. This is where I was creating a lot of my content. This is where I was hosting a lot of friends and family that would come in. This is where I was doing everything, right? I had my office in one of the rooms, I had my bedroom in the other room, and it was great. In the beginning, it was great because it was new. And like many of you all, as you're thinking about the spaces that you're moving into, or you're thinking about moving, or you just moved somewhere, your space becomes really, really important. Because your space, especially if you're a creator, especially if you're creative, especially if you're entrepreneurial, your space is where you get a lot of your ideas, right? So if you don't have a great creative space, it's hard to get great ideas. Does that make sense? If you don't have a great creative space, it's hard to get great ideas. So sometimes you may be telling yourself these stories of, I'm getting stuck, or I just haven't been creative in a long time. Evaluate your space. Evaluate, okay, am I in the right environment for my creativity to flourish? And a lot of times the answer is no, right? We're kind of living in these spaces where it's almost capping our growth. And so for me, when I was deciding and thinking about, where to live next, when I was living in Miami, when I first got here, I loved everything about it because it was new. I had so many new ideas. I had so much creativity. I started getting in so many different things. I started getting serious about trading because there's a big culture around trading and investing out here in Miami. I got really focused on my craft of marketing and running ads. And so this was a good space for me at that time. The more time I spent in Miami, here's some of the things I realized, right? Here's some of the things I struggled with and some of my challenges in Miami that ultimately led to my decision to maybe experiment with somewhere else. I'm not saying that I'll never come back to Miami or never come back to live here, but I'm saying that I'm in a season right now where I'm open to trying new things. And so here's some of the things. I think the first reason and a big reason, why I'm deciding to leave is because of community. So community is probably number one on the list. When I looked at, okay, what are the things that are sort of swaying my decision to leave and to try somewhere different? What I found in Miami is that it's really hard to assimilate in many ways. One, into just the ecosystem of Miami. It's really hard to find where the creative entrepreneurs are. And I don't mean, when conferences happen. I don't mean when events take place here. Because when events take place here and conferences happen here, it's amazing because people fly in, right? People fly into the town. And when people are in the town, then you don't even notice, right? Everything is great. And the people that are visiting in town, they're like, wow, Miami is amazing. And they think it's like this all the time. And I used to think the same way. And then I started living here and I'm like, okay, when these events dissipate and these conferences are no longer here, it's really hard to find community. It's really hard. I mean, I tried joining different orgs and clubs and events and all this stuff, but it's really hard to find. The type of community I was looking for was a very entrepreneurial, creative ecosystem that had a mixture, variety of people, different skill sets. And the ones I kept running into were, a lot of times around specific avenues like real estate or specific avenues like, crypto. And I'm not saying those are bad avenues, those are great avenues, but I think I was seeking more diversity in creatives that in the day-to-day process in Miami. I think that stance will probably change. In the near future, I may decide, you know what, no, I actually do need to be in Miami. And if I'm wrong, if you're in Miami right now and you're like, oh, boo, you missed out on all these other opportunities, let me know. Let me know. And make sure you're not a native of Miami, meaning you didn't grow up here, because it's a little different experience. It's a little different experience. So that's the first layer of community. The second layer of community is the people closeness, right? So I had people out here in Miami. I had my, big sis Dominique, and I had my mentors out here who live out in Fort Lauderdale, and my bro who lives out in Fort Lauderdale. And so and I made some friends out here. So I was starting to develop a level of community that I think started to kind of fill in some of that void where, you could rely on community. And many of y'all know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean the community in a sense that you have to be close or live down the street from where your family lives, right? I don't mean that. I mean having a reliable sense of a tribe, right? And I had some of that in Miami, but I think it was challenging. If I had a car, I'd go out to Fort Lauderdale more. Maybe if I had, so many other variables. So, I think that I try to maximize my time here and community, but I always kind of felt a void in trying to fill that. So I started looking at my travel, and I noticed that I would travel 50% of the time. So 50% of the time of me living here, I was traveling and on the road. And I was asking myself, well, why am I always on the road? And I realized outside of business, like business things, I was on the road because I was traveling to my community, right? I was traveling to my community in other parts of the world, right? In other parts and places from New York to LA to Atlanta to, in Mexico City, to other parts of the world, I would go travel, find my community. And the third level of community is assimilation. Am I saying that word right? I feel like I'm butchering it. But anyways, it was this third level of community where in Miami, let me just speak from my point of view before I'd say what Miami has or doesn't have. I found it hard being, Miami, I'm trying to figure out the political correct way of saying this. I found it hard, and Miami has a lot of diversity, right? There's a lot of people that come in and out, foreign, et cetera. A lot of people, big, Hispanic community as well. I hope that's the correct terminology, or Latinx community here as well. I just found it hard at times. Maybe it's because the area that I lived in, right? I lived in the Midtown area, but I found it hard being black in Miami. And I don't know if there's no other way of saying that. I found it hard sometimes being black in Miami, being where I lived at. I live in a pretty good area, but it was just challenging. Like, even sometimes when I go to restaurants, sometimes I go into the store, and I don't know. It was kind of like, if you all know me, I'm pretty chill. I'm just wearing a black T-shirt. Maybe if I dressed up nicer, you get treated a little bit differently. But I don't know. I just had some off experiences here where it kind of was like, okay. I don't know. It just brought back memories from past experiences. And so I struggled a little bit with that out here. And I'm not saying that's 100% the cause, but that's definitely something that I thought about, something that I definitely thought about, because it is something that happens, right? Miami. And I remember one of my friends telling me, who was a black woman who went to school out here in Miami, and she was just saying that during her time out here, as she was living here for, I think, 6 or 7 years, she just always struggled with being a black woman in Miami. And I kind of didn't understand that. I'm like, but Miami's so diverse. There's so many people. There's so many this. And then I live out here, and I'm like, okay, I get what you were saying. It's a little different. It's a little different. But anyways, I'll move on from that if that's uncomfortable for y'all. And again, I'm not saying I truly enjoyed a lot of aspects of Miami. I truly enjoyed it, and I can see myself coming back and living here. I think there is also the growth that I experienced in Miami. I think there's growth to be had in other areas to then come back, and maybe when I am a little bit more down my personal development journey, a little bit down my growth journey, that I'll be able to appreciate my time here more. I'll be able to appreciate my experiences here more. I remember, years ago when I lived in India, and at that time when I was living in India, right, I was living in New Delhi in India, I was having a good experience, but that experience didn't resonate with me until like a year later, until I left. And then I was like, oh wow, no, that was actually, there was actually a lot of things that I learned. I actually did enjoy it more than I had thought. So Miami could be one of those instances as I move out of Miami and saying, you know what, let me actually come back, because there's a lot of pros, and this is how I could design my life a little bit better to, be able to substitute all these other additional experiences that I was having here. So yeah, so again, if you're just tuning in, I feel like Will Smith. You ever saw Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in that last episode where he's in the living room and he's kind of looking around because it's the last episode, and he's kind of looking around an empty room. There's no furniture anymore, and you see this, sad facial expression that he has, and he goes over to the light and he turns off the light and he walks out the living room. That's how I feel right now. And as he turns off the light and he walks out, 5 seconds later, you hear Carlton in the background yelling, "Hey, who turned off the lights?" Which was a funny, ending of that scene as well. And so, yeah, someone says, I remember that episode. The first day I moved to Miami, I recorded an Instagram Live. And I was literally sitting at the same exact spot. You could scroll all the way back and check. And I was talking about all the things I wanted to experience in Miami. And now, my last day, I'm sitting in that same exact spot, recording another IG Live, telling you everything that I learned over the last 2.5 years while here, which is kind of crazy, right? Like, my first live 2.5 years ago to now, almost around the same time, to be honest. I think as I look ahead, I think Miami was great for personal development for me, because it put me away from a lot of things. Like, I felt most of the times when I was in here in Miami, when I wasn't traveling out, I guess the most alone in my thoughts that I had ever been, right? I did a lot of thinking in here, and I came to a lot of conclusions here, and I experienced a lot of personal growth here, and I'm still trying to put together the thoughts. I haven't journaled yet, so it's hard for me to actually express how I'm feeling or thinking without, you know, doing a journal first to getting my thoughts out before I, say something. I always like to do that. And so, but I had a great time here. I really, really had a great time. From whenever my mentors would come down from Fort Lauderdale, and we would we would go to get dinner with the family. We would rent out a yacht. Like, I love those times because we had a lot of fun. Or when my friends would fly in and spend time in Miami, and some of them had never been to Miami. So some of my friends, from Philly, the neighborhoods I grew up in, from friends all around the world, my space became, and people would joke around, became like an Airbnb, right? Like people that would come all over to spend the night here, to hang out, to workshop with me, to go eat with me. So it was great from my big sis Dominique, who would always come scoot me in her G-Wagon, and we were supposed to get matching G-Wagons. She ended up getting it, and then she's like, all right, there's one left on the lot. Like, come on, Abu, come get this G-Wagon. And I opted out against it because we were doing it as a reward. We both had a big number in our business, and so it's supposed to be a reward. And I ended up backing out because if you know me, I don't really do flashy. I don't know. Maybe I got to get over that. And then I thought I was going to get a Tesla. And then I was like, no, I actually hate driving. And so now we back here, square one, to my, bro Varick, who would always come through. And Varick was actually living here. So when I had my bro Varick living here down the hall from me, we would co-work all the time. And Varick's very similar to me in ways that we'd work from like 8 a.m. all the way to like 2 a.m. and then take a nap and then get back up at maybe 6 a.m. and then go work out and start work at 8 a.m. So when he was living here, we would do these like 2-a-days hard work session and hard working at the gym. And it was amazing. It was amazing when you have, again, that sense of community with you here. And then when Varick left, and so, Miami's been great. And as I looked ahead, I was looking at places that I wanted to move at. And I know many of you are like, okay, Abu, like, where are you going now? Where are you going? So let's talk about it. So I was looking at places to move to, and I quite still don't know. Like, I know where I'm going to be for the next at least 3 months. But if you ask me where am I going to be, the next 12 months, it's hard for me to tell you. I think that for me, I've been looking at a lot of different places. I thought about going abroad. I thought about places like Mexico City. I thought about places like Portugal. I thought about places like the UK because I have a lot of family there. So it'd be cool to, see them, years later. I thought about, where else I thought about? I thought about South Africa because I have a group of friends out there for the year, and they're kind of just working out there of entrepreneurs. I know I gotta pull up to Barcelona because my big homie Ebony's out there, living her best life, and she always tells me amazing things about Barcelona. So I definitely got to go through. And I thought about living in the States as well. I thought about LA. I thought about San Diego. San Diego is kind of like off the beaten path. I think I was thinking about San Diego because I have a homegirl living out there, and she was telling me like, oh, it's great for XYZ. So it was just on a list. I thought about Chicago, but then I thought about, wait, the winters are brutal. So I was like, nah. I would do Chicago for the summer, and I'm actually going to be spending a few weeks in Chicago this summer. So those are all the places I was thinking about, right? Atlanta. I was thinking about Atlanta. I thought about Houston for a brief second because I have some friends out there. I thought about going back to New York, because I used to live in New York. I used to live out in Brooklyn. I didn't think about Philly. I grew up in Philly. I did not think about Philly. When you grow up somewhere, sometimes you just don't want to be there for the immediate future. I thought about a lot of places, and here was my deciding factor. My deciding factor was over the next 3 months, at least, I want to go to a city or a place that I have a lot of community there. I think that I kind of just need to be recharged. I'm inspired when I'm around people that are moving and building in the same direction that I am. So I was like, okay, I need to go in a city that has I have community there, and there's, a community of builders, of other entrepreneurs as well. I thought about a city that also had an expansive airport where I was able to get to the places I needed to get to. I thought about a city that also had the food culture was pretty good. And also there was some African food around. And one knock against Miami is that there's literally no African food here in Miami. Like, there's literally no African food in Miami. And a lot of it, when I would map them out, was in like Fort Lauderdale area. Like, a lot of the African cuisines were in the Fort Lauderdale area in Miami. And, Miami's supposed to be a city that has all different ethnicities of food, but they really don't. And I could be wrong. You could tell me, and, I could be wrong. I was looking to go to a city that I felt like I could grow in some areas in my personal development that I hadn't been able to grow in Miami. Oh yeah, I also did think about DC too. I thought about DC. I used to not like DC when I was younger, but the more I visit, the more it rubs off on me, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. And so I thought about all these places. Here's what I narrowed down to. And the reason why I'm so hesitant on saying where I'm going next is because I've had a lot of bad experiences of people like coming to where I'm at, or people knowing where I live, and all these different things. So here's some of the cities I narrowed it down to. Let's say that. So and we could, because the other thing too is when I'm living in a specific city and there's awareness around it and people know I live there, then there's like this demand of like, oh, we gotta meet up, we gotta hang out, we gotta and I don't like we gottas because I'm a very, very private person. If you know me, on social media, it may not seem like that. On social media, you may feel like, oh, Abu's so outgoing, which is true. It's, I know how to do that, but most of the time my default state is I'm very private, and I'm definitely an introvert that can be an extrovert, but then I need to recharge my batteries. So here's some of the cities I narrowed down to. This is where I'm going to be spending my next 3 months. Again, the next 90 days, this is a city I'm going to be spending time in before I move to a different city. So I'm just going to give some cities I narrowed down to, and I won't say what specific city I'll be in. And again, I'm sorry if you listened to this entire thing. I was like looking for the specific answer, but I hope that we could connect. And obviously, I don't mind telling people in private, but I just hate putting it out publicly where people, because I'm going to leave this video and this audio up where people could actually see where I'm at. So when I was living in Miami for 2.5 years, most people didn't know I lived in Miami, and I kind of like that aspect of it. So here's some of the cities I narrowed down to that I'm going to move to. And again, I'm trying not to give the exact detail location, but I'll tell you the top 3 cities, and then you could use your deductive reasoning based on some of the things I said earlier in the conversation, some of the things I was looking for in the next city. So I'll give you 5, and you could use deductive reasoning. So here are the 5 cities. Based on what I've said so far, if you deduce, you would know which city I'm talking about. And again, I won't confirm it, but you'll be able to deduce which city I'm headed to next. So here are the 5 cities I narrowed down to: New York, DC, Atlanta, Houston, and Philly. Obviously, based on our conversation, you could use deductive reasoning and deduce that it's not Philly, because I literally said, when you grow up in a city, and I grew up in Philly, it wouldn't be, I don't see myself there immediately. So out of those 4 places I just mentioned, those are the options. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry if you're looking for a direct response. But I really, really do appreciate all of you all for being on this journey with me. And I'm definitely going to miss my time in Miami, the experiences, the moments, just a lot of the memories that I had here with a lot of friends, a lot of family. I remember when my mom came down here, she was just like so, just happy because, we didn't grow up like this. We never lived in a high rise before. So, being the first of our family to even live in a high rise, multiple times over, it's definitely, for them, it's like, oh my God, you made it, like we made it, and stuff like that. So it's always funny. And I think for me, I more so live in these spaces and travel around, not only for myself, but also for my friends and family who we would never have been able to do this, be able to really just experience this, right? Be able to experience this. And so, yeah, that's all I really got. But I'm really looking forward to the next 90 days. And then after that, I'm going to reevaluate. And I'm going to see, where I'm going to move to next. I'm really considering going abroad, maybe doing Mexico City, maybe doing Portugal or UK. And that's about it. This has been great. If you have any questions for me, drop it in the comment. And if you have any recommendation, if you think that, okay, maybe I should change my direction and move somewhere else, if you think that I should, not go to one of those cities like New York, DC, Houston, or Atlanta, if you think that I shouldn't consider those cities to move to for the next 90 days and I should go to LA instead, or I should go to Chicago instead, let me know. Or San Francisco, and I could redirect. I could redirect. Now that I basically got rid of a lot of things and downsizing my lifestyle, going back to being minimalist, let me know, because I could redirect if it's not one of those cities. But I love those cities, right? New York, I have a lot of familiarity with. There's a lot of African food in New York, right? Like there's a lot of different types of food. The airports, there's 3 airports, well, 2 in New York and 1 in Jersey, so I'm able to get international really quick. When you look at DC, DC has 3 airports too in the DMV area, so that's like a really good spot. DC, not as many entrepreneurs that I ran into, like a lot of people in government and corporate. But DC has a little creative community out there, one of the biggest creative out there in the DMV area, Ronnie Brown, girl CEO. Shout out to Ronnie. Who else? What's other cities? Atlanta has a big entrepreneurial community as well, and Black people in Atlanta and creatives. And I think Atlanta Airport also goes everywhere too. I could be wrong. And I hear Atlanta logistically, when it comes to getting around, it's kind of hard, like in the airport. And Atlanta, I think I would definitely need a car, whereas DC and New York, I don't need a car to move around. But Atlanta, I hear when you're in the airport logistically, it's a nightmare because there's so many people living there. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, Angel from Spice Suite in DC. She is amazing. She is absolutely amazing. So shout out to her too. Yeah, she's out there too. Yeah, shout out to Angel. Yeah. And in Houston also a lot of Black people. And I think there's a lot of creatives out there and a lot of, opportunity out in Houston as well. And I'm not sure, I don't have too much knowledge around the airports out there. So I'm going to pick one of those cities to spend time in over the next 90 days, and then I'm going to go from there. Someone says DC Metro goes everywhere. TSA are clear. Yeah, I do have TSA and clear, but every time I'm in Atlanta airport, it don't matter if you got TSA or clear. Like, there's so many people that live there where it's just like, man, like TSA or clear is wild. Is definitely wild. And one thing I did appreciate about Miami and Fort Lauderdale is I was able to get through TSA and clear in like 5 seconds. Even though there was a lot of people here, I think having 2 airports helped more than having just one central airport. And I can't explain why. Well, I can explain why, but I won't explain why in this conversation. But I appreciate you all. If any of you are in one of those 4 cities, whether it's DC, Atlanta, Houston, or New York, let me know. Maybe, grab coffee when I'm in those cities. But I truly appreciate you all giving me some of your time today. On to the next chapter. This has been great. Looking forward to the next chapter. Quite honestly, I don't really know what the future holds, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out together. And if you enjoy this, maybe I'll start doing some more personal updates. Ronnie wants me to share more of my personal life, and I'm kind of hesitant on sharing my personal life because it's the internet, and people are weird sometimes, so I'm always abrasive a little bit, like hesitant on sharing, but I'll just leave it there.
Thank you for joining us at the Powered AF podcast. Make sure to visit our website and make sure to follow our podcast anywhere you listen to the podcast to make sure you never miss a show. And please, 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 if you enjoyed this episode and this show, please make sure to leave us a review. It really, really does help. And last thing, if you're interested in this freebie that I just released, I want you to check this out. Recently, I put together a free online training on how to 10x your sales online. This is for business owners who are struggling with making consistent sales online. Whether you run a product or service-based business, this is the perfect training for you. The free training is still up, and you can access it by going to poweryourlaunch.com/pod. Again, poweryourlaunch.com/pod. That's POD. All right. Thanks again for listening in. I'll see you during our next show.